husband of 12 years, cheated on me with his coworker and decided to leave me and our kids. A year later, he is back begging me to take him back and demands that I accept as a fair child since his new girlfriend left him. My husband Brian and I have been together for 12 years. We had dated for 3 years and were married for 9. We had 2 kids together, Chelsea and Kyle. My parents absolutely loved him, and I was close to his mother as well. Looking back, in the beginning, Brian and I have a wonderful relationship, characterized by openness, honesty, and a complete lack of secrets. He was truly my best friend, and I absolutely cherished him and our relationship. I had never once questioned my trust in him. However, there were a few things about my husband that would sometimes irk me. My husband was always quite the flirtatious guy and would get really close to his female coworkers. In the beginning, I would chalk it up to being harmless, but then I started noticing how a few of the women would reciprocate back his flirting, and this made me uncomfortable. We discussed this several times, and he would justify saying that he's an extrovert and just like making friends, but I would urge him to reel it in with his over-friendliness. Looking back, I wish I would have made it clearer, but it never bothered me all that much because we rarely did things apart, and I never thought he would make things beyond harmless flirting. I also believe there was nothing wrong with some playful banter, especially when it was in the right setting. I thought we had a very solid understanding of where the lines were drawn. My husband and I were both registered nurses, sharing the same night shift scheduled from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. At this point, we were just newly married and didn't have any children, so we were okay working night shifts. Even though we worked at the same hospital, we were always assigned to different floors. One of the rules we had established regarding flirting was to never engage in such behavior with coworkers and to always keep our personal and work life separate. I did not want any workplace drama, so I asked my husband to firmly respect my boundaries, and he did for a long time until the incident happened. Anyway, while I was at work one night, my husband had a night off. Before I left for work, he mentioned that some coworker had invited him to a karaoke bar we often visited with our coworkers or our non-work friends. I encouraged him to go, as he seldom hung out with his work friends outside of work, and it sounded like a fun opportunity to mingle. He ended up heading out around 8 p.m. to go back home and texted me throughout the entire night. From his text, I could deduce that he was a bit too drunk to drive, so I suggested to take an Uber back home. He opted for an Uber to one of his coworkers' apartments and then planned to head home from there. He kept me updated with text the whole time, and I was genuinely happy that he had gone out and enjoyed himself. When I got home from work, he was still awake, so I took him to pick up his car from the bar, and that was the end of the night. The next morning, I arrived home from work once more, and there he was, sitting on the couch thinking about something with the TV off. It struck me as a bit odd because he was always watching his games, but I chalked it up to him being tired, considering we both worked night shifts, and our sleep schedules were often out of sync. I asked him if he had eaten something, and he shook his head without even glancing at me. I assumed that he had just woken up or something. After a quick shower, I joined him in bed to catch up and have a chat as we always usually did, especially since I just finished working 2 nights in a row. He seemed lost in thought and sad more than usual. Suddenly, he asked me if he could talk to me about something. My husband tended to get stressed easily and had anxiety issues, and when he needed to discuss something, our conversations typically began this way. I snuggled up to him, ready to provide a pep talk. He began by explaining his inclination to flirt, something I was already aware of. He went on to share that months ago, during an outing with friends, he had flirted with a girl and felt that if he were single, he might have pursued a hookup with her. I remember him sharing this with me a few months before, and I thought we had addressed this matter when it happened, so it wasn't a surprising revelation to me. Then he mentioned that the events of that night had been weighing on his mind for months, and the previous night when he went out for a karaoke, he had a similar encounter with a coworker. I froze in shock as I did not expect him to say something like that. He continued to share how this coworker was flirting with him at the bar, being very touchy-feely, and he felt attracted to her. He went on to confess that she had leaned into him, and he ended up making out with her a few times. I sat up in the bed when I heard that. I could feel a dull ache on my chest, and I felt like I could not breathe. Brian held my hand, urging me to calm down. I managed to keep myself composed during his confession, or at least I think I did, and we proceeded to talk through the details of that night. He explained that they got drunk, stepped out of the bar together, and ended up making out. She was aware that he was married, and during their interaction, she acknowledged feeling like a terrible person for doing this with a married man. He in turn felt the same and conveyed to her that he couldn't pursue anything further with her. They then promised to not do this again and walked back inside the karaoke bar. Later, the party shifted to another coworker's house, so they both headed to the house together, and he insisted that nothing more happened. They walked out together, shared another kiss, and then called separate Ubers to go home. At this point, I had tears streaming down my face. I felt torn about whether to believe that nothing more had occurred or not, since I knew how drunk my husband was that night, and there was no guarantee that they could have just left it at that. Regardless of how far they had gone, he clearly breached my trust. I questioned him about it when he thought about me during that night, why he didn't leave earlier if he sensed the flirting was escalating, and how he could text me so casually through all of it. He had narrated his entire night to me, from the drinks to leaving the bar, going to the other coworker's apartment, and Ubering home, so I was under the impression that he was just having a good time, but in reality, he was actively damaging our marriage by kissing another woman. My husband tried to justify, saying how this girl was just a travel nurse, so she wouldn't be working with him for much longer, and how this was just a one-time mistake. He hugged me as I cried into his arms, feeling my heart break in pieces. The thought of him being around her again bothered me, but he kept insisting that he would never do this to me again. I was worried that people were going to be talking about this behind our backs, but Brian was confident that no one else noticed, which I found hard to believe. Everyone knew he was married, and they knew I worked right down the hall from him. I did not want to be that pathetic girl who stays with her husband when he is clearly cheating on her. I didn't want my coworkers to look at me differently. This is why I had asked Brian never to flirt with coworkers. I felt so betrayed and utterly humiliated. I couldn't believe I allowed my husband to disrespect me this way. The painful part was that he had apparently spent months contemplating how he wished he could escalate things with someone else, even if it was just making out. Who was to say it would not progress further down the road? He still had to work with her for at least a few more weeks, and there was no way his coworker would not realize what was happening. Brian kept begging me to forgive him, but I was shaken with rage and disappointment. I did not know if I could even call my mother and talk to her about this, because then she was going to seriously judge my husband forever. I was just devastated. The details were excruciating for me to process. The months of harboring such thoughts for that woman, texting me all night, kissing her, and continuing the night at a second location after already kissing her. It was all so painful. I wanted to believe that nothing more happened, but a significant part of me doubted it. I never thought my husband would be capable of hurting me so profoundly, and I didn't see why he wouldn't lie if more happened. I spent the day in tears, screaming, feeling a physical ache from all of this. It was early, and my initial gut reaction was to forgive him, thinking we could work it through. However, the more I kept dwelling on it, the less inclined I was to do so. He was devastated as well, and the part of me that was still his wife wished I could take away his pain. It was painful to see him hurting so much, but he was the one who hurt me in the first place. After a week of me avoiding him, Brian came to me and suggested that we go for couples counseling. He had to persuade me a bit more, but eventually I agreed. Going for counseling turned out to be a crucial turning point for us. The sessions provided a safe space for both of us to express our feelings, fears, and frustrations. We began to understand each other on a deeper level, exploring the root causes of the issues that had led to his actions. The counselor guided us through open and honest conversations, helping us rebuild trust and find healthier ways to communicate. It wasn't an easy process, and there were moments of discomfort and vulnerability, but it was necessary for our healing. As we navigated the counseling sessions, we also worked on addressing the underlying issues in our marriage that had contributed to the breach of trust. Brian showed remorse for his actions and actively participated in the process of rebuilding our relationship. After months of counseling, I began to feel a bit better and started to trust him again. Brian was showing genuine effort in our relationship, and I appreciated that. He no longer flirted with anyone and never got drunk around his coworkers. Things only went up from here. I got pregnant with Chelsea and had to quit my job. My husband was earning quite well, and he was the one who suggested that I should take it easy and not get stressed with work during this time. I won't say that I like being a home worker, but I wanted my child to have a parent taking care of them 24/7. I gave birth to Chelsea and everyone was so happy for us. My parents came and stayed with us for a couple of weeks to help me take care of the baby. Brian seemed to adore our baby girl, and we thought everything would just be okay with us. Then, a new nurse called Vivian joined my husband's hospital. I met her for the first time at the wedding of two of their coworkers. My husband's whole shift had been invited for the wedding, and Vivian was also there. She was very flirty with my husband and kept hugging him or touching his arms while laughing throughout the wedding. I had taken Chelsea with me since I wanted some of my ex-coworkers to meet my daughter, and Vivian immediately kept trying to get close to Chelsea by saying how she absolutely loves children and couldn't wait to be a parent someday. I smiled at her politely before excusing myself. She then went to Brian to tell him how adorable his daughter was and how she had the same good looks as him. When it was time for everyone to dance during the reception, Vivian kept insisting that Brian should escort her to the dance floor and asked me if I would mind. I shook my head since I just wanted to be polite and watched my husband and his coworker dance and laugh throughout the entire night. Fast forward to the Christmas party when the whole friend group had been invited, including me. I left Chelsea at home with a babysitter as I needed a night out to just chill and drink. Brian didn't like that and kept insisting that someone should stay behind since Chelsea might need us. When I told him that since it was his idea, he was welcome to stay behind as I needed one night off from childcare and wanted to see my friends. He fawned and proceeded to argue about the importance of family and responsibility. In the end, I didn't care and refused to stay home, so we drove together to the party. The whole shift was there, and it felt good to see my old gang. I noticed that Vivian brought her sister as her plus one. During the party, all the women were hanging out together, except Vivian and her sister. She was hanging out with the guys. I just assumed it was because she didn't really know most of the women and tried to call her and include her in our conversations, but she would then find an excuse to walk off and talk to Brian and his friends. A few days later, she sends Brian a couple of photos that she had snapped of him without his knowledge. The photos were accompanied by the text, "I have no idea why I took these, but I guess the sunlight looked beautiful on your skin." She showed me the photos and his response to her, which was pretty PG. I found it a bit odd and immediately remarked to my husband that Vivian seemed to have a small crush on him, and Brian blushed. We laughed and he brushed it off. In the next few weeks, Vivian convinced Brian to get Snapchat by saying that everyone had the app and it was more fun to use it. I have never been a fan of Snapchat and Brian has never had any form of social media, so it was shocking to me that he even agreed to her. After he got Snapchat, I noticed that he was on his phone a lot more. He would smile a lot while chatting on Snapchat. I would obviously ask him about who he was chatting with, knowing that it was probably Vivian, but he would brush it off, saying how I was being nosy. During this time, I got pregnant with Kyle, and I don't know if it was my pregnancy hormones, but I hated to see my husband smile on his phone for hours every time he came back from work. I wanted him to spend more time with me, but he would make up some excuse or the other. One night, I checked his phone while he was sleeping. I am a naturally nosy person, and I realized that this is a flaw of mine, but I wanted to see what my husband was up to. So I noticed that she would send him several snaps asking him if he was working or if he was going to work the next day. She would even ask him things like if he wanted to get a coffee together, and this made me really uncomfortable. The next day, I told him that he needed to avoid her, but he brushed it off, saying she was just a coworker and I was overthinking. One night, we went to a new coworker's house for a dinner party, and I noticed none of the wives I was friends with were present. I had to come back home early since I was already not feeling well that day, so before heading to the party, we had discussed about leaving at a reasonable time. At 9:45 p.m., I inquired with Brian about our departure time. He hesitated and hemmed and hawed, saying that it was too early to get back. Admittedly, I got frustrated after asking him for the third time and walked off. He in turn got mad and decided that he was staying as late as he wanted. Throughout the night, I repeatedly asked when we were leaving, reminding him of my health, but he would just ignore me. As the evening progressed, I found myself spending the rest of the night alone on the couch in a stranger's house since I didn't know anybody. 4 people came to check on me, but Brian and Vivian never did, and I could see them sitting beside each other outside talking and laughing without a care in the world. A month later, we went to an art festival which was an hour away from our home. When we reached there, Brian saw in her Snapchat story that Vivian was about 30 minutes away from us. Without my knowledge, he told her our location and asked her to meet up with us. I only became aware of this conversation when I asked him who he was talking to, and he mentioned that it was her. This sparked an argument since I thought he wanted to spend the evening with me, leading us to leave before she arrived. Later, he admitted that he should not have invited Vivian to meet up with us and apologized to me. A few months later, I gave birth to Kyle. During this time, Brian told me that he had stopped talking to Vivian altogether and he had even deleted Snapchat because he did not want to upset me any further. However, I did not believe him, as I noticed him getting emotionally distant from me over the past few months, and I had a lingering feeling in my gut that something wasn't right. Succumbing to the intrusive thoughts, I decided to check his phone once again. To my dismay, I discovered that Brian and Vivian had been talking to each other on TikTok this time. They would send each other memes and cute videos of proposals to each other. She had sent him a video that had the quote, "How can you confess to someone that you have a connection with them when you both are not officially together, but you both know that you are more than friends?" When I confronted Brian about this and how inappropriate I found their relationship to be, he denied, saying that she was just a friend. He told me that I should not have a problem with her, since she was just like any other friend, but I pointed out how other friends did not send him videos like this, and he got pissed. In anger, he told me how he would rather be friends with her than be married to me. This made me burst out crying, as I could just not take it anymore. The only reason I had stayed with him was because we had 2 minor children together, and I knew that I did not have the money to raise them on my own. Later, he apologized to me and told me that he had deleted his TikTok videos also from his phone. At that point, I had no trust left in him, as I was so hurt by what he had told me earlier. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing a change in him. He was very low energy, taking jabs at me here and there, trying to get me to spend more time away from home. He had also been coming home late from work a lot. I would sometimes find him coming home chewing gum and one night smelling like weed when he never used to even smoke. I recently went home to see my parents with our 2 kids. He would call and wish the children good night every night, but one night, I could not reach him. The next day, he texted saying that he had slept early and missed my call. When I got back home, I knew something was wrong with him, because he was not even able to greet me properly. He was avoiding my eyes a lot. I asked him if he was still talking to Vivian, and he got very defensive. I asked to see his phone, and he wouldn't let me see it. I decided enough was enough, and decided to call Vivian right then and there, even though my husband tried to snatch my phone from my hands. I locked myself in the bathroom so I could have a talk with her. When she picked up, I straight up asked her if she and my husband were having an affair, since I was just sick of living with the suspicion. She added that she had been sleeping with my husband, but that wasn't even the worst part. She went on to tell me how he had wanted to leave me and the kids for quite some time, but he didn't know how to. She told me how my husband loved her, and how if I had any self-respect, I should leave my husband so that her child can have a father in his life. I was speechless by her audacity. When I came out of the washroom, my husband was on the ground crying. He told me how he had been sleeping with her, and they only recently found out that she was pregnant. He told me that he had been working up the courage to tell me, but he was afraid of hurting me even more. He continued to reassure me that he still loved us, but he couldn't deny his feelings for Vivian anymore. He insisted that he needed to be there for her during this time. I was overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions, unable to make sense of what was happening, and it felt like the walls of our home were closing in on me. My voice quivered as I asked him if he was leaving me and the kids for this woman. He nodded slowly, expressing that even though he didn't expect me to understand, he felt the need to do this for himself. Apparently, he had given it a lot of thought, and he had chosen to be with Vivian so they could raise the kid together. He told me that he would support me and the kids financially as much as he could throughout all this. The world came crashing down around me. I just couldn't believe that my husband was leaving me and our kids for his coworker. My worst nightmare had come true, and I just wanted to scream, plead, or do anything to make him stay. But then I looked at his face and realized that he had already made his choice, and there was no turning back. Brian moved out the following week, leaving me to explain to our children that their father wouldn't be coming back. Chelsea, who was old enough to understand, had 1,000 questions that kept asking why Daddy would do that, but I had no answers. Kyle, who was still just a baby, couldn't fully grasp the magnitude of the situation yet. I felt numb and shattered during this time, and my children were the only thing that kept me from drowning in my depression. When I first told my family about Brian, they had the same reaction as me. They just couldn't understand why on earth my husband of so many years would do something like this. I had to tell them everything right from the start about how Brian had always cheated on me. I felt so humiliated and broke down in front of them. My mother hugged me, telling me that it was not my fault. When I told Brian's parents about him leaving us, they were furious and went off on him. They gave them their peace of mind and told them that he would not be getting a single cent from his will. For context, his parents are doctors, so they're quite wealthy. They assured me that they would give me and the children everything that we wanted, and we would never have to worry about money. We discussed, and my parents wanted me to get a divorce from him, which I agreed. but I needed some time first to process things and get my life in order. Meanwhile, Brian's parents agreed to pay for our rent while Brian would continue to send child support money every month. Eventually, weeks passed, and I slowly started to heal. Our family and friends rallied around us, offering us support and a shoulder to lean on whenever I needed them. I decided to focus on finding a job so I could provide a stable environment for our children. Finding a job was a bit difficult since I had been unemployed for quite some time, but as Brian's betrayal spread among our friend group, everyone rallied to show their support for me. Some of my old coworkers helped me in applying for different positions, and I was finally able to secure a nursing job. What I loved the most about this job was that I had to move out of our house. My family and Brian's parents helped me with my move, and they were happy that I was starting afresh at a new place. During this time, Brian continued to live with Vivian, and they would post lovey-dovey pictures on their social media. He had wiped all pictures of me completely, and it was like I didn't even exist in his life. Finally, I filed for divorce from Brian after I found a good lawyer. It hurt me so much to divorce my best friend, but I knew that there was no point in dragging this any further. Brian and his lawyer didn't bother to protest and agreed to pay me alimony since they knew that I had enough evidence about his cheating. He didn't even fight for any custody of our children, and I was awarded full custody with child support payments. After our divorce, I blocked Brian from my phone and all my social media, and I moved on from him. Chelsea does remember her dad, but she also understands that he abandoned us, so she eventually stopped trying to contact him and learned not to bring him up anymore. Kyle was too young to remember his dad, so he has no memories. My job has been going well. Brian's parents refuse to meet Vivian and acknowledge her kid as their grandchild. They regularly call me up and sometimes drive over to meet my kids. Now, coming on to the incident at hand. Yesterday, I received a call from an unknown number. I thought it was maybe one of my coworkers, so I picked up. To my surprise, it was Brian on the other end of the line. He sounded distressed, as if he had been crying. It had been a year since I had talked to him. I didn't even understand why he was calling me out of nowhere. But I did not want to be rude, so I asked him if he was in some kind of an emergency, but he denied it and told me that he wanted to see me urgently as he had something important to discuss with me. I refused and told him firmly that I had no intention of seeing him and that if he ever showed up at my doorstep, I would call the police on him. I reminded him that we got a divorce and I got full custody of our children, so he wasn't allowed to visit them either without taking my permission. Brian's voice quivered, and he confessed that he was sitting in his car parked right in front of our house. My eyes widened in shock as I ran to the window to check and found that he was actually parked outside. The realization sent shivers down my spine, and I felt a mix of fear and anger. I demanded an explanation, asking him why he would do something so inappropriate and intrusive. Brian's voice continued to waver as he admitted that he was here because Vivian had left him that morning. He told me about how they had been having problems in their relationship and how Vivian was never happy about being a mother, so that morning, she had just packed her bags and disappeared. He told me how he had called her multiple times, but she did not pick up, so then he had tried to call his parents who refused to help him. In the end, he thought he knew he could ask me for help since we had such a history between us. He told me how he regretted leaving me for Vivian and that maybe this was our second chance to get back together. I was shocked by what he was saying. He continued to say how we could raise his affair child together and this way we would all be one big family. Hearing this, I stopped him in the middle of his talking and firmly told him that he seemed delusional and unhinged. I told him that I was done with him and politely asked him to not ever call me again. I cut the call after warning him yet again that I would call the police. As I peeked through the window, Brian remained in his car. A mixture of sadness and desperation etched on his face. He then furiously tapped into his phone and I got a message from him saying how I was being too cruel to him and his baby when I could just forgive him and move past this. I left him unread. After a few minutes, I watched him drive away in defeat. Ever since then, I have been so confused as to why he even showed up at my doorstep. Like, what was he even thinking? I'm still wrecking my head over it. Am I the a-hole for ignoring my ex-husband's pleas to get back together? In just a few days, I have received thousands of comments and messages from people. I'm so glad that so many of you don't think that I'm the a-hole for ignoring my ex. I listened to everyone's advice and decided that I should reach out to Brian's parents and inform them about this. I will update here once I talk to them. So I talked with Brian's parents as well as my parents. All of them agreed that what Brian did was completely inappropriate and that it was right for me to not allow him to come in. Brian's mother did reach out to him and have a talk. It turns out that Brian was indeed telling the truth and Vivian had disappeared on him overnight. She did leave a note saying how she didn't want to be a mother anymore, so now he was going to be a single father, I guess. Brian apologized to his parents for showing up at my doorstep, telling them how he could not think straight, and asked one of our old coworkers for my address because he knew he could always depend on me in the past. Brian's mom told him how wrong this was, and he agreed. His parents firmly told him that he was the one who had decided to leave me, so now he should leave with the consequences of that decision instead of running back to me. They warned him that if he ever does this again, I would call the police on him, and Brian has assured them that he won't bother me ever again. I've also talked to Chelsea regarding her father and asked her to tell me if her father ever contacts her without my supervision. She's a good kid and knows what her father did to us by abandoning us, so I know if Brian ever tries to reach out to her or tries to show up at her school, she will let me know immediately. It's been 8 months since my last update, and we're doing well. Brian hasn't dared to reach out to me since that day. I have installed security cameras around my house just in case. I was recently promoted at work, and it feels like a huge accomplishment. It took me a long time to reach this position, but I'm finally earning a comfortable income that allows me to provide even more for my children. The promotion not only brings financial security, but also the satisfaction of knowing that my hard work and dedication have paid off in the end. My family and friends stood by my side, providing support whenever I needed it. I am planning on taking a few days of work next month so I can take my children to visit my parents. I haven't seen them in a while. Brian's parents continue to be in touch with me and send my children gifts on Christmas and on their birthdays. As for Brian's affair child, I have no idea how he's doing. I hope Brian is a good father to the child and has finally stepped up this time. Thank you everyone for your comments and DMs throughout all this. This is going to be my last update, since I want to move on from this entire ordeal and focus on my life with my beautiful children.